Do you ever catch yourself saying, English is just crazy? Maybe your students come across a tricky word and you tell them, you just have to memorize that one, or this is the part you have to know by heart. But deep down, you know it's still confusing. Here's the truth. English isn't random. It's a wonderfully complex system, and once you understand how that system works, through sound, structure, and meaning, everything changes. That's what Sarah, Paul, and I teach inside Mastering Morphology. This isn't another curriculum. It's deep teacher knowledge inside a practical, comprehensive course that finally shows you how words really work. No more exceptions, no more gimmicks or patching holes with memorization or phonics alone. It's time to go beyond sound it out and give your students the framework they need to truly understand words. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start teaching with confidence, join us inside Mastering Morphology. Enrollment is open now, so we invite you to click the link in the show notes to get started. You're listening to episode 91 of Literacy in Color. Welcome to the Literacy in Color podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Sullivan, a science of reading advocate with over a decade of experience as a reading interventionist and literacy coach. I'm passionate about making evidence-based instruction both effective and engaging. If you're interested in captivating our learners on reading fluently and understanding language, or as I like to call it, keeping it colorful, then you've found the right place. Each week, we'll explore intriguing lit bits and practical strategies around the science of reading and structured literacy to help you be colorful and teach colorfully. Are you ready to bring literacy to life? Let's color outside the lines and make an impact together. Today, we're diving into a topic that sits at the heart of everything we do in literacy, and that is vocabulary. Essentially, there would be no literacy if it wasn't for all the wonderful words in the world, right? So if you've been here long enough, you know I love a good word breakdown. So let's start out by digging deeper into the term vocabulary itself. We get our modern-day English word vocabulary from the Latin word vocabulum. This word has a deeper historical root, vocare, meaning to name or call. And it's the same root in words like vocal, vocation, and even invoke. We could take this core meaning and think, name or call, and think, hey, vocabulary at its heart is what we name or call things within our language, whether it's physical things or more abstract ideas. Now, vocabulary isn't just limited to the fanciful, exceptional, and sophisticated words in our language either. But see what I did there? It encompasses all the words we know and use in the world. Everything from simple everyday words like ball, bird, and bike, to more complex academic language like facetious or flabbergasted, maybe even content-specific words like photosynthesis. We're using vocabulary to call things things, and essentially, it's language. In this episode, I'd like to address why vocabulary is so important and also share 3 considerations we can take into our instruction. So let's start out with this overarching question. Why does vocabulary even matter? If you think about models like Scarborough's reading rope, vocabulary lives in that language comprehension strand. And here's the reality. You can decode every word on a page, but if you don't know what that word means, tapping into semantics, comprehension, or making meaning from a text completely falls apart. In fact, there's research that suggests that students need to understand the meaning of about 98% of the words they read in order to have solid comprehension of that text. And that research comes from Schmidt et al. From 2011 and even Nation in 2006. Just to demonstrate this idea, I always think about the fact that I can read in Spanish pretty well. I can decode it. I can even roll my R's. So, for example, this is a belief that I'm sure we all share, but la lectura es muy importante. But if you don't know the vocabulary, it's meaningless. You're not understanding much at all. And by the way, I just said reading is important. But that's exactly what happens for our students. Literacy depends on language. If you don't understand a word by listening, you won't understand it by reading. And going even deeper, you won't be able to use that language in your writing. Everything is connected. If students haven't learned a particular word in their environment, they won't be able to read that word or connect it to meaning. And essentially, our brain acquires vocabulary in 3 different ways: by hearing words in spoken language, by reading words in texts, and by being taught words explicitly. And actually, there's a really good research base about significant vocabulary acquisition via reading words in texts. Researchers often call this wide reading. And at the heart of it, the more you read, the more words you're exposed to. And fun fact, there's also research to show that children's books have nearly double the amount of rare words than an adult conversation. The one caveat, though, is that the benefits of wide reading happen only when students become literate. There's a Matthew effect here. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The voracious readers exponentially expand their vocabularies by gobbling up a variety of texts, while readers who struggle don't encounter the same experiences. So that's why explicit vocabulary instruction is essential to level that playing field. While hearing, reading, and being explicitly taught words are the pathways to acquiring new vocabulary, one thing we could do to make that pathway more like a super fast expressway is to make the experience of explicit vocabulary instruction multisensory. We know that the brain fires off when it's utilizing the senses. Oftentimes, we hear the word multisensory when we talk about phonics instruction, though, and our minds immediately may go to shaving cream and hair gel, sand. But multisensory simply means we're engaging more than one sense simultaneously. Think about how you learned the word sour. You experienced it. Maybe you had a lick of a bright yellow lemon and your face instantly puckered up. Perhaps your eyes squinted and your lips tightened as that sharp, tangy taste hit your taste buds. Maybe you've even smelled something citrusy or tasted a sour candy that made your whole mouth tingle. And even now, just imagining that lemon, you might feel your mouth instantly watering just from visualizing your past experiences. So this, my friends, is multisensory. The more senses we use when we're making meaning of a word, the more of an impact it can have on our understanding. So with that being said, let's dive into the practical stuff. I'm going to give you 3 high-impact moves that we can consider to create language-rich environments in the classroom when we're explicitly teaching words. My first tip is a simple one. When we introduce new words, try to incorporate visuals, ideally even real-life photographs. So just a moment ago, we talked about making vocabulary instruction multisensory. Now, we can't touch, taste, or smell every word of the world, especially in a classroom setting, but we can visualize words. Here, we'd be pairing auditory, so hearing and saying a word, with a visual, seeing the word and also seeing a representation of that word. And this is all to make meaning stickier in the brain. Sometimes vocabulary words aren't concrete objects, right? So for these more nuanced Tier 2 words, we can find images that represent a word in a particular context. So for example, in a word like astound or astounding, maybe I find an image of a person making a shocked face as they watch someone else do a backflip. For a word like enormous, maybe I show a picture of an elephant. And fun morphology connection, enormous is out of the norm. Definitely not a normal size, but extraordinary in size. So play into that with visuals. The wonderful thing is, nowadays we can pull beautiful images straight from Google or Canva. Tip number 2 involves expressive understanding. Now, in traditional vocabulary instruction, we'd typically say, here's this word you just learned. Now use it in a sentence. But what's the problem with that? For the vocabulary word challenge, we'd get a sentence like, that is a challenge. For a vocabulary word like sluggish, we'd get a sentence like, he is sluggish. Check. I did my assignment. These types of sentences don't tell us a thing about what the student actually understands about the meanings of those words. They just name the word. So rather than having students use words in a sentence, provide students with a sentence stem. The student will have no other choice but to use the word in context. So for example, it could look more like, she was faced with a challenge when blank. Perhaps she was faced with a challenge when she had to ride her bicycle up a tall hill. Or maybe for sluggish, he felt sluggish when blank. And perhaps you can respond with, he felt sluggish when he stayed up too late and had to wake up early for school. I encourage you, even as literate adults, to finish those stems yourselves and think about the brain power that goes into thinking about a word conceptually. Tip number 3 is to assist students in creating word networks in their brains. And here, we can think about this concept of using word webs or even semantic maps. And this can be done a few different ways. So firstly, if we're building out a semantic network, we want to think about other words that are associated with that word. So let's take a word like enthusiasm. We might pair some other associations to that word, like bright wide eyes, big smile, beaming, energetic movements, loud voice, jumping, excited, eagerness, joy, laughing, maybe even saying, I can't wait, right? We might witness some or maybe all of these things if someone is demonstrating enthusiasm. And essentially, the more association someone has with a particular word, the more glued that word comes into memory. Now, we can also think about word networks from a morphological standpoint. I always like to say when we consider morphology, if you teach one vocabulary word, you actually teach 10, maybe even more. So for example, if I learn the word enthusiasm, I can create this word network in my brain of other words I know in the family, like enthuse, enthused, enthusiast, and enthusiastic. They're all related. Now, thirdly, we can also tap into comparing and contrasting when we're creating a word network of related words that are nuanced or slightly different. So in these instances, it's helpful to do activities that focus on shades of meaning with synonyms ranging in intensity. So back to our word enthusiastic, maybe you created a word web using words like thrilled, excited, passionate, or even zealous. And what students can do is determine which word is least intense and which one is most intense. Another spin on it is to have one end of the spectrum even be an antonym. So in this case, a good word to stick in there would be unconcerned or disinterested, maybe even apathetic, and have students determine the continuum. There may not be a right or wrong answer. The beauty lies in their discussion and rationale. And then as a class, you can have rich conversations about why they thought a certain word was a better fit in a certain spot along that continuum. So those are my 3 tips. I also want to leave you a note that I'll be presenting on vocabulary at the Science of Reading MiniCon this June in Racine, Wisconsin. Tickets are still available, and I'd love to see you there, especially if you're local to that area. And before we sign off, I'd love to encourage you all to turn vocabulary into play. Research tells us that multiple encounters are required before a word is really known, and that comes from Stahl and Fairbanks. But we don't have to let vocabulary and word learning just feel like a block of time on your schedule. Rather than having this checkmark, it's done mentality, think about how you can build an environment that appreciates word consciousness. Because the end goal isn't about memorizing definitions every single week. The goal is for students to own words, to use them in conversations, to recognize them in texts, and to bring them to life in their own writing. Thank you so much for tuning into Literacy in Color. I hope today's episode left you feeling both inspired and equipped with something new to add to your teaching toolkit. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would truly mean so much to me if you'd leave a 5-star review. It helps other educators find the show and join our colorful community. And don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For more tips, tools, and resources, be sure to check out the links in the show notes at michelleandthecolorfulclassroom.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, be colorful and teach colorfully.